Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me for the last session in the breakout this afternoon, where we are going to talk about creating a positive company culture. I'm delighted to see so many of you, A, because it's lovely to have loads of people at your presentations, but also because I had a little bet with my colleagues Simon and Adam at Benefex that I was going to get the most people into my presentation. Well, what do you know, I have. So even if you're only come to help me win a bet, I'm very grateful for that. So we're going to talk this afternoon about company culture, which is something that's really close to my heart. I'm Chief People Officer at Benefex. I've been enrolled for about 3 years now. And during that time, my remit, my focus and my ethos is very much on prioritising culture, because I firmly believe that from a great culture, everything else will follow, that it is the foundation of our businesses. And that's what we're going to talk about this afternoon. I'm going to talk at you for a bit, and then we're going to have an interactive session, which in a room this size will be interesting. So expect to get to know each other very well. Sounds slightly odder than I meant it to, but we'll come on to that in due course. So let's start with the basics. That word culture, it's everywhere, right? You only have to pick up any kind of industry publication, read any kind of blog post, and culture is always mentioned. But I would ask the question, which is actually, we've come so used to talking about culture, do we truly know what it means? And I certainly questioned myself when I started to put together this presentation, knowing my topic was culture. Actually, what do we mean when we talk about it in an organisational sense? So I went back to the dictionary. I went back to the dictionary definition of culture, and obviously there's various definitions that you can get there, but specifically the one in the yellow box is the one that we're talking about. So culture, when we think about our organisations, is that collection of behaviours and beliefs which is characteristic to a particular group. Now the really key word there is characteristic, because culture isn't something that we can force. Culture is something which is quite innate. It comes from every single person that we choose to bring into our business when it comes to their beliefs, their behaviours, what they naturally bring to our organisation. And so when we come on to talk about ways that we can influence culture, it's really important for us to remember that we can't force it. We can't stand up in front of our organisations and say, this is the culture we're going to have and that's how it's going to be. I mean, A, you're going to get some very fed up employees, but you're also not going to get there because all of us have those innate behaviours that are characteristic to us. It stands to reason, therefore, that when we look to influence culture, the place we need to start is right at the start of the employee life cycle. And I'm going to come on to some case studies in terms of how we can look to do that. Before I do that, though, I want to show you a bit of a model, because I think sometimes there's this misconception within organisations, particularly when you kind of start to look at board level, that culture is this very soft topic, that it's a very kind of a fluffy HR topic. And actually nothing could be further from the truth, because it is fundamental to what we are able to deliver as a business. And I think the model we've got here kind of shows that. So culture is the foundation of everything we do. It is the foundation of our business. And the reason for that is it's culture and it's those behaviours which make up our culture, which drive our employees' engagement. Now, when we talk about employee engagement, we're talking about our employees' engagement with our business objectives, with what we're trying to achieve as an organisation. Engaged employees focus together as a group on what we're trying to achieve. And therefore it stands to reason that we're going to achieve more of our goals with the collective focus of the business behind it. Now, the interesting thing is what you then get is you get this kind of cyclical effect, because an organisation achieving its business goals is then able to invest more in culture, more time, more resource. It's able to positively reinforce those behaviours. That drives further engagement. That drives the further achievement of objectives. And so that really positive cycle starts to continue. And that's where we're all aiming to get there. That's where we want our organisations to get to. Because if you're in that kind of organisation, it's a really great place to be. You're achieving loads, you're fulfilling your potential, and everyone's having a great time while you're doing it. So that's the holy grail, that's where we want to get to, but we probably all can think of examples and organisations, hopefully not the ones we're in right now, where that hasn't been the case. So let's flip that model on the head and let's see what happens when this time our culture isn't driving engagement. This time the behaviours that make up our culture are actively driving employee disengagement. Now, disengaged employees don't care about the business objectives. They're not interested in the goals that we're trying to achieve. They are solely focused on their own personal, individual objectives. Now, what you find in an organisation whose culture is like this is that the business objectives are almost unnoticed. Probably no one in that organisation can tell you what they are. Employees focus on their own personal objectives, and what this does is it fragments the focus of the workforce. With that fragmented focus, you're not able to achieve your goals. But what it's also doing is it's further driving your culture in kind of almost the reverse of the model we've seen previously. It's driving more of those destructive behaviours. More destructive behaviours drive more disengagement, drive further disengagement with the business objectives, and so that really negative cycle continues. And having worked in one organisation, thankfully well in the distant past now, I can tell you it is a miserable experience when you find yourself in there, but it's also very, very difficult for us as HR professionals to get the organisation out of that cycle. Far better to put the positive influences in place from the start, so we end up in the positive model that we saw previously. So with that as context, I want to talk about how we get that culture right. How do we make sure that we find ourselves in that first model? And to do that, I thought it would be helpful perhaps to talk about a couple of case studies from my own experience during my time at Benefex in terms of some of the things that we've done to positively influence culture. And once I've done that, we're going to use the collective wisdom of the room, because I'm sure all of you have got your own stories to tell in terms of actually how you've also positively influenced culture. And we're going to share some of that a little bit later on in the session. So getting culture right, I said at the start of the session, the biggest opportunity for us is to look at the start of the employee life cycle. If we bring the right people with the right behaviours into our organisation, we make our lives so much easier as a result of doing that. 3 years ago, we made some pretty wholesale changes to what we did in the recruitment process at Benefex. And I want to share these with you, but before I do, I want to show you the evidence of the impact of what we've done, which has had. So I decided to look at one of our key organisational health measures within the business, which is employee attrition, so the rate of employee turnover. In those 3 years, and we can directly correlate the trend in turnover, in those 3 years, we've seen our overall employee turnover fall by a massive 34% of what it was previously. So for us, that's a huge step change in terms of those levels of turnover, levels of employees leaving the organisation. Even more vitally though, turnover for employees with less than 6 months service has reduced by almost 70% compared to where it was. So if you think about the wasted cost and the lost opportunities when you bring somebody in and it doesn't work out, we've absolutely transformed what that looks like. And as I say, we can directly correlate it back. So giving more weight, I guess, to the fact that culture isn't a soft subject. It isn't something that, just for us as HR professionals to be worried about. This should be something which every single member of your board is focusing on, because the outcome is really very real and very tangible. So how did we do it? Well, there are a number of key things that we did, and it probably won't surprise you to see that number one is we made culture our absolute number one priority when it comes to recruitment. So before these changes, we did what probably a lot of organisations do, which is to focus very much on skills-based interviews, competency-based assessments, etc., etc. We changed all of that. So now, if you come for an interview at Benefex, once you've gone through an initial telephone screening, you'll initially meet with myself or one of my team, and that first interview, that is all about cultural alignment. Now, to be really clear, when I say cultural alignment, what I don't mean is we're trying to create this set of identikit Benefexers who all behave in the same way. You need a diverse workforce. We know that. Our workforce is really diverse, and we're really proud of that because we know it helps us to be stronger, make better decisions as a business. But there are certain go, no-go elements in our culture which we cannot and we will not compromise. So a really good example of that would be something like, if you join our business, you've got to be able to demonstrate that you can work effectively across multiple teams. So we ask about that in interview, but it's not just a hypothetically, how would you work across multiple teams? It's a, give me examples of where you've worked across multiple teams and what the outcome of that was. At the end of that interview, we will have that list of kind of go, no-go cultural areas. And if there is any of those boxes which isn't ticked, then it doesn't matter how great that person's skill set is, they go no further through the interview process. And that can be really hard because we've all been there. I'd put my hands up and say there's been times we've been desperate for a skill set, someone's come along with those skills. You know in your heart of hearts they're probably not going to be culturally aligned, they're not going to want to help you drive the business forward, but you think we're desperate, they can start really quickly. Let's bring them in anyway and maybe it'll be okay. And every single time I have tried to do that, it has failed. Sometimes it's failed very quickly, and sometimes it's failed more slowly, and it's almost the ones that fail more slowly which are the more damaging cases, because then those destructive behaviours can really start to ripple across your organisation. So culture is everything. Culture is our number one priority, and out of everything I would say that's what's made the biggest difference in our recruitment process. We've made recruitment a truly two-way process. Now I know so many organisations say that, don't they? Yeah, it's a two-way process, and what they mean is you'll get like 2 minutes at the end to maybe ask half of one of the questions that you've prepared, and then we might lie to you about the answer anyway. We've made it a truly two-way process, and so what I mean by that is we talk to sort of individuals who come in to meet with us, and we ask them about their experiences. But we also talk to them very, very candidly about what it's like to work at Benefex. And like any organisation, I'm sure with loads of great stuff about coming to work for us, but we have our challenges as well. And we're really very, very upfront about those challenges. And the reason I think that's important is if you think about the psychological contract between employer and employee, and you think about that employee coming in on that first day to that business, and they've been sold the dream. They've been sold the dream through rose-tinted lenses. They're going to come in and it's going to be fantastic. And they walk through the door on the first day, and that isn't what happens. That isn't what they've been sold, is not the reality. You think about how that starts to impact on their behaviours. Even someone who is kind of, absolutely aligned with where you're going as a business will start to demonstrate destructive behaviours. Those will start to ripple, and you can get yourself into a real problem. So it's about making sure that that trust isn't broken. It's about being upfront about the organisation before you bring that person in. We have fundamentally changed how we get people involved in the interview process from around the business. So historically, we maybe had HR and probably the hiring manager meet somebody, and that was kind of it. Now, as a minimum, we have at least 4 different groups of people meet somebody coming into Benefex for interview by the time they get through final interview stage. It might sound a bit counterintuitive in terms of, well, surely that's going to compromise your view on culture. But it's actually really important, because if you think about the unconscious bias that all of us have, by bringing in that cross-section of people from across our business, so they'll meet somebody from my team, so they'll meet somebody from the people team, they'll meet the hiring manager, they'll then go meet some of the people from the team they're going to work in. Again, that two-way process, a real opportunity to ask about what's it really like to do this job, what's the good stuff, what's the not so good stuff. And they'll meet someone from our board of directors as well, and that's as a minimum. We have some people come in who, kind of through the stages have met maybe 10 plus Benefexers. Again, it's that two-way process, but it also gives us the best possible opportunity to see them in a number of different scenarios and really genuinely understand, actually, if that cultural alignment we believe is there is a reality. And then the last thing we've done is we've tried to break down the barriers. Now, interviews are like a really horribly awkward process. It's like the worst kind of date, right? You're sat in that kind of weird meeting room across the table from somebody, and you kind of know the sort of questions they're going to ask, but it's very uncomfortable. A lot of candidates are very nervous. The barriers go up. And it's really hard to see who the real person is behind that facade that's gone up. So we do everything we can to try and break down those barriers. So if you come to interview at Benefex, you probably won't be sat in a meeting room across the table. You're more likely going to be sat on our picnic bench in reception, maybe on one of our sofas in the library, somewhere where you can also get a bit of a feel for the business as well. If you sit in one of our meeting rooms, you could probably be anywhere, but sitting there and really starting to feel the business you're coming into. We also do some stuff which is deliberately designed to do just that, to make it feel less awkward. So my favourite part of our recruitment process is something we call the Lego test. We basically bring in our candidates and we give them a box of Lego and we say to them, you've got 5 minutes, build us something. Now, some of you are looking at me with a face that says, well, that's a bit gimmicky, isn't it? And I get potentially some of the cynicism, but hand on heart, I can tell you that Lego test is probably the most valuable thing that we do. And the reason for that is you give someone a box of Lego and immediately the barriers come down. Immediately, people probably a bit, okay, this is a bit mad, they might laugh, they're going to open up a little bit more. And we sit and we watch them build and we find out what they're making, we ask them why they've chosen that, what do they, how do they plan, what do they do if something goes wrong. I probably learn more from watching candidates in those 5 minutes than I do throughout the whole of the rest of the interview process. Just doing something that little bit different, all of a sudden the barriers are gone. It makes a massive difference. And we know it makes a difference not only when it comes to obviously what we've seen happen with employee turnover, but also if you go and have a look at our Glassdoor reviews on there, and particularly our interview reviews from both people who've been successful and unsuccessful in getting roles. The fact that we've made it a two-way process, that we have broken down those values, that people come away feeling that they really understand the business they're joining, that they understand that culture, has transformed how we bring people into the business. So that's the recruitment process. You brought the right people into your business. Then you've got to keep on positively reinforcing the behaviours. So the next question is, what do you do to reinforce those behaviours to get yourself into that continual positive cycle that we saw on the first model? So most organisations have a framework that they hang those behaviours around, and typically that comes in the form of your company values. Now, I would put my hand up, and I think the rest of the board would put their hand up too and say, prior to last year, we had not got our values right at Benefex. We had a set of values. There were 4 cornerstones. They were up on our kitchen wall. We got people to physically sign up to them with handprints, like an episode of Blue Peter by the time everybody had been through there. But they weren't doing anything. And the reason I know that is first and foremost because when I came to interview and I said, oh, cool, so what are your company values? And there were a lot of very blank faces. Nobody knew what they were, despite the fact they were up on our kitchen wall in letters like 6 foot big. Nobody knew what those company values were. If they didn't know what they were, how can they possibly be positively reinforcing behaviours? They can't. people didn't own them, people didn't engage with them, people hadn't truly committed to what those values meant. So last year, in spring last year, we relaunched our values. Came up with a set of 8 new values, which have gone up on our wall again, and we've got people to physically sign up to them. We've got people to physically commit to them. We did a company-wide presentation where we talked to people about, what these values really mean. They're quite short, so they're phrases like make it global. What does that truly mean? But then we went well beyond that to make sure that people could really commit to them. So myself and my team ran a series of workshops with every single team in the business, values workshops, and at those workshops we brought the values to life. So we sat with, for example, let's take the finance team. We sat with the finance team. One of our values is deliver every day. And we said to the finance team, if I come into finance, if I want to be the greatest exponent of deliver every day the business has ever had, what is it that I need to do? What are the behaviours that I need to be demonstrating? And we went into this real granular level of detail for each department in terms of actually what did that value mean to that team. Where we ended up with, and you can see a sample of this here, and actually if you go onto our Twitter feed today, on our Inside Benefex Twitter feed, you'll also see all of these up on the wall in our kitchen area, a values charter for each team. So this is an example from the people values charter. So if I'm new to the people team and I want to deliver every day, I can see that the number one thing I need to do on that list is any agreed deadlines, I'm going to commit to hitting them. That's my commitment to the business, I'm going to do that. All of a sudden, the values stopped being just words on the wall. All of a sudden, people could use them to recognise great behaviour, to encourage peer-to-peer great behaviour, to call out examples perhaps where people aren't aligning. All of a sudden, they're real. All of a sudden, they're genuinely driving our culture and making a positive difference within the business. So those are just a couple of case studies. There are absolutely loads I could give you. Those ones are quite big. I mean, sometimes really small things can make a huge difference as well. We've brought in a team of values champions at Benefex, so a group of people who help us to drive forward initiatives that are going to really help move our culture forwards. Our internal recognition scheme, off the back of what Matt talked about earlier, in terms of actually peer-to-peer calling out great behaviours which align with our values, which are driving our culture forward and rewarding those people. But as I said at the start, you guys are sitting here listening to me long enough. I know we have amazing examples of people doing this everywhere in this room. So I've got some willing Benefexers at the back of the room. Now, in my head, I was like, yeah, we can all break out and go to whiteboards, but I think there'll probably be a disaster if we do that. So what I'm going to suggest is if you stay in your seats and kind of form into groups with sort of the people in front and behind of you, various Benefexers are going to come around. And what I'd like you to do is just in your small groups where you're sitting, perhaps share some examples of things you have done in your organisation to drive your culture forward, to drive the achievement of your business objectives. Now, it can be the really big stuff, but it can also be just really little things which have made a tangible difference. And I'd love to hear from anybody who potentially has been involved in a destructive culture in that second cycle that we looked at, and what you've done to start to turn that round. If we share ideas, we'll put them up on the flip charts. We won't have a huge amount of time in this session to go through with them, but what I will commit to doing is writing them up and writing out to all of you after this session so we can share some of the ideas, because we all face the same challenges, right? Different organisations, but we're all going through a similar set of circumstances. So probably give you about 7-8 minutes to do this. So my willing Benefexers will come down. If you can form yourself into tiny groups, and we'll see what we get out of this. You're going to come around that side, Ben? Yeah, perfect.
In the world, so we'll try our best for you. It's one of we've gone through 30 chapters so we don't actually and I think so what we say is I think we can find sites and coffee sites. In fact, I'll give an example. Work on there's almost like it's like
if you guys haven't got a scribe, there's a spare whiteboard just there. So if you can write up any ideas just up there, that'd be amazing.
It's really, really hard. think this is starting to help give us a bit of direction, because I think until we started to do it with the process,
Two big brands.
any value.
So one brand that was marketing what it does.
I mean, I know what they are, I can tell you all about
Bringing
them,
those brands together.
but we've actually now, in fact, done very similar things. I've got some sort of Benefex,
We're doing the launch in
and
June.
one of the manufacturing
Bringing
sites now is actually
everyone
taking
together
those
so there is one
values
identity.
that actually said
One
they're
business
listening to
platform,
us,
one business.
instead of just saying, regurgitating what we want, words around it, they've actually said, well, leadership, this is what it means to us in production, but this is what it means to us in customer service. So we've still got the same core values, but people are actually putting what their views are and attaching that to it. So, and that's what we're going to try and do.
As opposed to like a blanket approach, yeah.
Absolutely. Rather than saying these are the four values, this is what you've got to do. We're actually going, I now see us going out to wider business and saying, what does Attrition mean to you? What does being
I'm loving the honesty. It's like HR confession time, isn't it?
It's not, well, I mean, all the words mean slightly different.
They wouldn't even know. Mean anything. No, they don't. All of this is so true. Quite well. But this year we haven't done it. They go into the branches. Yeah, many of them don't know about them. So they just completely get lost. It's a really pointless exercise. Keeps them happy. They don't know about
So you let it on day one, when you forget it, when you take on information anyway, you forget if I can get to your normal work area.
Too much time I've got then. Look at you, Mr. Multitasker. Face I do. Okay, amazing. So give them about another 3 minutes. Super stuff.
Talking about our values.
What they're coming up with in terms of things they've done in their
The
organisation.
actual examples of the values, but then also the challenge.
But yeah, any examples of things that they've done to drive their culture forward. So anything big or small. The more the better, Joe. Get them all up.
And the problem was, at a senior level, it made perfect sense. It was tough lumping it all. They felt like it really made sense.
we're the other way around. We had seen people just like,
The problem is, it will filter down to the deputies. The room will go, oh, no one really is anyway. They're only doing this because they have to. They're
There was a very particular way of framing it, and it does sound like an American old paper, but in practice it really was right, and this does mean
that is a big shift.
That's a massive achievement.
Yeah.
I think apart from that,
Yeah.
not much you can't do.
Yeah.
We have really, one of the things that resonates is expectation.
Do a time check for me then in a sec. Do a time check for me in a sec.
Or creative idea.
I mean, I'd love to do it myself, but I can't emulate your face, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you can.
So you walk in,
Okay, cool. Call them back in. Yeah, perfect.
telephone boxes that you can go and sit in and make phone calls. You've got all the other things in. It's all like London. We talk about attrition. So we go from that agency, that actual agency, if you will, to actually the actual nuts and bolts of it, where it's manufacturing, and you're into a business facility, and you're sending out somewhere in the region of 3 million a year to we provide 7 out of 10 envelopes that go through your so if you get state rates, if you get, with Centrica, you get television releases, we will do it. So, it's that sort of thing. So you've got to have very so, and some people would have one source. The business, our business needs to understand that. So as much as they're trying to, I feel, with these 4 values, we were now relatively interpret those 4 words. So it's an interpretation. And I think to be honest, listening to this today, it's really focused it for me because
I deleted it.
But they do go from sort of analysing paperwork, change law to our everything. From an education perspective, and being the same
Guys, I'm really sorry to have to do this, but we're going to have to pull back together, I'm afraid. I'm going to get into trouble, yeah. My baton holder is going to tell me off otherwise. I'm really sorry to have to stop everybody and bring you all back together. Thank you, Ben. Just move that over to the side. Genuinely some fascinating conversations going on there, kind of sound bites and snippets floating over, and I'm truly sorry to have to stop, because like how rarely do we get a chance as HR professionals to sit and chat to each other about our shared challenges. And I have a think actually in terms of, is there more that we could do as a, kind of from a client group, those of you who are clients, whether we can do something, because I think it is quite refreshing just to hear, just literally walking around the groups I've walked around, there's so many shared challenges. I love the number of people who described their organisations as dysfunctional. That was excellent. Didn't realise so many of you were going to be relating to the second model. But if I look at the stuff that's come out in terms of, I think a common theme coming through is, what do you do when your senior leadership isn't buying into the importance of culture? And I think that's really key to address. And, it is all about perhaps going back to some of those models and actually looking at, how can you demonstrate to them the impact on engagement? It's fundamental, it is absolutely clear. And some of the statistics that we're showing, sharing some of the data with that team, I would absolutely agree that if you're in an organisation where your senior leadership team doesn't believe that culture is important, you are probably onto a hiding to nothing. My first suggestion would be see if you can change it. And as you probably guessed from me, I'm quite a determined person. So, absolutely, I think, going in there and talking to them very candidly about why it is important. But I also think you have to take a view, and there are some organisations still, unfortunately, who don't get the value of culture, who don't get the importance of the employee experience. I think you can only push so far, and then you probably have to question, is that the right place for you to be able to make the maximum impact? Just realised I've lost my clicker. There we go. Excellent. Good. So apologies, as I say, to have to wrap it up. So many good conversations. I'm going to be around all afternoon, so if any of you want to come and continue those later this afternoon, please, let's come and have those conversations. I would love to hear more about what you're all doing. We will, as I promised, also share kind of all the output, and feel free to have a look as you wander around as you're sort of leaving the room today. But I guess just to summarise, just to finish up in terms of the things that we've covered off. So it comes back to culture is fundamental to our businesses. It is the foundation of our business, because ultimately it is what will make the difference between us succeeding or us failing as a business. It is that black and white. Right culture drives engagement, you deliver. Wrong culture drives disengagement, you fundamentally fail to deliver. But you can't force culture. You can't sit there. It's like shouting at a plant and telling it it's got to grow. That'd be great if that worked, wouldn't it? But it doesn't work. But you can surround, what you can do is you can surround that plant with the right conditions to enable it to grow. Culture's very like that. You can't force it, but you can massively influence it and nurture it by what you put around your organisation. The earlier you prioritise it, the easier it is. The earlier you get that focus, bring in those right people, those people who want to deliver change, who want to deliver for your business. And you're probably going to have to make some tough cultural choices about your existing employees in your business as well. We've made a decision at Benefex that we are going to be unafraid to act when we see an individual who is deliberately hell-bent on actually being detrimental to our culture. It comes back to that not compromising on culture, which is my final point here. You cannot compromise. Every time you try, you will fail, and ultimately you will damage your business and you will damage what you're able to achieve as a result. And I guess if I leave you all with a call to action as you kind of head out, I think there's going to be coffee. I think it's your last chance to go to the Benefex Expo. So I pronounce that right? Yeah, Sophie's nodding, good. Okay, so please make sure you go to the Benefex Expo and get stickers. They get stickers? Yeah, okay, so please make sure you go and do that. Have a coffee and then we'll be back in the main auditorium. But I guess to leave you with one thing to take away, which is of everything we've talked about today, of the discussions that you've had, of some of the points we've gone through, I would encourage all of you to think as you leave this room today, what one thing can you take back to your organisations to make a difference? And that's not a difference in 3 months or 6 months or a year from now. What one thing can you go back and start to change tomorrow? And it doesn't need to be something huge. Sometimes when it comes to culture, it's the smallest things that really can make the biggest difference. Thank you very much for listening to me. Have a great rest of the afternoon. See you all later.